Welcome to the midday moment. Of course, we're not quite on time again. We are still working on that. When I say we, I mean me, and it's getting my schedule lined up a little bit better to do this. Right at midday Eastern time is my goal on that. Unfortunately, not been making it. But anyways, we are going. If you're in Central Time Zone, this is kind of midday. I think maybe if you count it from sun up to sundown, maybe we're closer to midday by that measure. But anyhow. Want to take a moment to talk about this Gallup poll that is going around. While the figures are still fresh in my head, I don't have them necessarily right in front of me. So if I make a mistake on the exact numbers, I apologize in advance. We'll try to put up a picture on the screen when I repost this. But a Gallup poll going around about young men ages 18 through 29, and there's some things there about religion that are interesting. At least we have that among young men 18 through 29, that 42%, and this is up from a 28%, 42% are saying that religion is very important to them, and that attendance at religious services among them is up to like 40% from 33% just 2 or 3 years back, around 22, 23 there, 2022, 2023. So we do see a little bit of a surge with these things. And how to interpret this and what does it mean? Well, the mission has not changed. The mission has not changed. The mission for the follower of Jesus is still to seek and to save that which was lost, to make disciples of all the nations. You can have a lot of people being more religious, but here's the thing. Consider the thought that Paul shared in Romans 10, verse 2, where he talked about among Israel, among the non-believing Jewish people, about how they had a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. I definitely have seen a rise among younger men of having religious zeal, religious fervor. You will find the phrase Christ is King in many a profile, and on the surface, that phrase is perfectly fine. Now, there is not always good intentions behind that phrase. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's being used as a gotcha against somebody because they're of the Jewish, sometimes just the Jewish ethnicity. So that's a whole discussion there about how some people are misusing that concept, because while Christ is definitely King, he has all authority in heaven and earth, he's King of Kings and Lord of Lords, yet the way some people are using that phrase, it's kind of sad. Half the time you see that phrase in somebody's profile online, it indicates that they hold some sort of anti-Semitic view, which once again, it's weird because Christ is King. The phrase itself is not anti-Semitic, but it is being used in anti-Semitic ways. But that's another discussion for another time. Try to address that more in the future. But in mentioning that this does bring up something with this rise that I've seen, among religious sentiment on the rise among younger men. There also are some other alarming things that go along with some of this. Oftentimes, this is religious fervor without much actual religious education. And so you see some truly legalistic views. You do see some views about modern day Israel that, while I am definitely I am not a traditional Zionist, but I do believe that Israel has the right to defend itself, and compared to the nations around them, for the most part, they are a far more sane nation. And what happened on October 7 happened, but while I don't share the same views about Israel that a premillennialist would, you have some that are latching on to the idea of premillennialism being wrong, but then using that like against modern day Israel to essentially say that they should, not exist anymore and things like this. Or you'll have some that along with their religious fervor, they hold some white supremacist ideas. They once again, they do hold some Jew hatred. misusing ideas like his blood be upon us and upon our children, which was a statement that some of the Jews in the mob said that has no power over the innocence or guilt of any future generation. The idea that it would is contrary to Ezekiel 18, but you see these things being misused. You see some not support of traditional biblical patriarchy, but some blatantly misogynistic ideas, actual misogyny, not the way it's been misused, but actual women are, the idea of women actually being inferior, actually like needing to never, teach in any capacity. They can't even share their thoughts online, this sort of thing. So in other words, with the rise of more religious thought among some younger men, there are also some very toxic ideas going on. These are some of the ones that are, they are supporters of what Candace Owens has been doing in this just ongoing onslaught against Charlie Kirk's, the organization he was one of the main founders of, or against his widow, and this constant slandering of her, this constant just asking questions to insinuate all kinds of things without any actual evidence, when they have the guy that all the evidence points at actually assassinated Charlie Kirk. Or there are supporters of men like Tucker Carlson who have become just blatantly anti-Semitic, just caught lying about all sorts of things, lying about the circumstances of his recent visit to Israel, downplaying the oppressive conditions that are found in Islamic societies. And so there is a lot of toxicity going on right now among young men with this rise in religion. I say all this to say, we can't look at these polls and say, "Oh, wow, that's great. The spirit of Charlie Kirk. They're going back to church because of Charlie Kirk," and some did, and that can be a positive thing from a horrific, tragic, evil thing that happened. But they need to be discipled. They need to be discipled. They need to be trained. We can't settle for saying, "Oh, okay, well they're worshiping and they're saying Christ is King." If they're saying Christ is King, but their life doesn't show it, their attitude doesn't show it, they don't have the compassion, the mercy, the desire to see people saved that Christ had, that's a problem. And I have seen with some of these younger men with the rise in religious fervor, they're not just saying, for example, that homosexuality is a sin. They're showing outright hatred towards the homosexual. They're not even. It's not just that they're saying that the adult style entertainment is wrong, but they're saying that any woman that comes out of that field and is trying to change her life, that she's always going to be that way, sort of idea. They're trying to overlook very foundational concepts like forgiveness and grace. So with this Gallup poll, yes, that can be a positive thing. But if they have more zeal for God, but it's not according to knowledge, then they're not being disciples of the Christ. And they're still spiritually not well off. As usual, the mission needs to continue to not just make some religious people of all the nations, but to truly make disciples of all the nations. And a disciple of the Christ is defined by somebody that abides in his word. Hatred of people because of their ethnicity or skin color, that's not abiding in his word. Acting like women are somehow inferior is not according to his word. Hating the sinner, particularly certain types of sins that I would agree is, taking further steps away from, some sins are taking further steps away from God's intentions than others. But, viewing that sinner, with spite and hatred, essentially having a Pharisaical attitude, being like the Pharisee at the temple in Luke 18, standing there praying to God, thank you for making me so great. I'm glad I'm not like these other people. We need to make sure they're being discipled and taught, or else that Gallup poll, that Gallup poll, let's put it this way, that Gallup poll, without them being discipled, it's just a stat. And they're still, if they're not being discipled, if they're not growing in Christ, if they're not actually following Christ, they're still lost. So the mission is the same. We need to make disciples. This has been the midday moment, a little bit longer one maybe. Thank you for being with me. Lord willing, be with you tomorrow morning for the morning message. And shalom.